Retail Podcast, a global conversation hosted by Alex Rezvan Viennet.
Hello and welcome back to Retail Podcast. Today we're going to focus on the future of athleisure, and we're very lucky to be joined by Marion Rabat, who is the co-founder and CEO of Ernest Leoty. If you don't know who they are, they've appeared in The Telegraph, The Financial Times, Tatler, Vogue, Women's Health. They're a Parisian-inspired brand, so they've appeared in the French press. Marion, hello and welcome.
Hi, very nice to talk to you. Thanks a lot for having me.
I found that just by doing a little bit of research for the podcast, your journey into creating a modern day digital brand, I don't know if it is normal or wasn't normal, but you didn't sort of come from the retail background. You, if I'm correct, you came from investment banking?
Yeah, no, that's correct. So I worked for 10 years in finance. Before setting up Leoty, and I actually trained as an engineer, so I'm also an engineer.
Wow.
So yeah, it's actually very, very unusual. I think it led to two things. One is that I definitely did not have, I didn't know how things were supposed to be, so I wasn't experienced. It's not something I had done before. That has both positives and negatives, I guess. On the negative side, I had to recreate everything from scratch. But on the positive side, it meant that I could just do things my way rather than the way, a certain industry thinks, things need to be done. So I think all in all, it was very positive.
It must have taken a heck of a lot of courage. Like great leaders, you didn't think about that you had any courage, but...
No, in retrospect, I would say now that I've done it again, now that I've done it once, I could definitely do it again and much better. I remember one of the reasons, I built Leoty is because my brother had a startup and I could see him and, it seemed a certain way from the outside, which basically I didn't think it would be that tough. I didn't realize it. So, and I think people can't really understand unless they've done it themselves. But from a courage standpoint, I think when you start something, I don't know, at least myself, I was more like easy about it. I was like, well, if it doesn't work out, I'll just go back to what I was doing before. So I was still quite young and because I had thought, do I do it now in my early 30s or do I wait till I'm like 50 or something? And I was like, who knows where I'll be when I'll be 50.
But if you did have some words of wisdom for a 22 or 3-year-old Marion, what would be sort of your words of wisdom? What have you learned that you wish you sort of knew back then?
Is your question relating to my startup or in general?
Well, I think it's interesting, right? So however you want to interpret it. So whether it's a life...
I would say my main words would be, first of all, the fact that things will fall into place. So actually, I'll give you an example. Before I was a student, I actually hesitated between studying engineering or going to art school.
Right.
And now I'm in somewhere where I can kind of do both, at the same time. So I think we all have a path and we all end up kind of where we're supposed to be. And then the second advice I would have had is to just go with the flow. And I think the most important thing is actually the people you meet and what you learn rather than, some other milestones people may have, I guess.
Sure, thank you. A little diversion off the route about talking about the amazing brand. Tell me where did you get the inspiration for the name?
So actually, I wanted to revive an old French brand. One of the reasons being that I'm obviously French, but I grew up mostly in London. And people abroad, both in London and New York, and people would, always comment on the fact that I'm French and how they think, French people are so chic. And at the same time, I had worked at the Louvre Museum when I was a student. And I had found, these archives of all these amazing old French brands from the late 1800s. All these brands, and there are a lot of them, have kind of disappeared. And one of those brands was Ernest Leoty. He was a corset maker from the late 1800s, and he had introduced stretch into corsetry. And I just thought it would be an amazing brand to revive for many reasons. The main one being he was so relevant to today's world and the movement of athleisure, the movement of people wanting to dress more comfortably. The reason being his motto was basically to introduce comfort into corsetry.
Wow.
And at the same time, his aesthetic really resonated with me.
Yeah. And the corset obviously, early on played a major part. You have a very distinct style, or very distinct, from distance. You can almost tell it's a Leoty. I can with my lay eye. We've obviously just come out, and some places in Europe are still in lockdown. I've read the headlines about athleisure companies doing very well or having a good time during the lockdown. How has the last 4 months been for you during this sort of crazy times that we've just gone through?
I think I was definitely extremely lucky to be in a segment, as you said, that did perform well during lockdown. I think COVID and lockdown were transformational for my business in two ways. So one, for sure, people spend more time at home. They don't go to the office anymore, or much less than they used to. Also, they spent all this time during lockdown working out from home, sitting somewhere where no one else would see them. So in that sense, they've gotten used to wearing a lot of comfortable clothing, athleisure, and this is a trend I'm sure that's going to continue in the future. So, I think for us it was a positive because people definitely spend more in that clothing category.
Yeah.
And then the second point, which is really interesting, is the digitalization of the business. So we were lucky to have already our website ready, but our online sales have performed very well. And I think people in general have gotten more and more comfortable with buying online. So I think it's both for the purchasing channel, but also the communication channel. So for example, we are very active on Instagram. We launched all these home classes, which people could do from their homes, like yoga classes and things like that. And it's something that will stay with us throughout the years. So I think for sure lockdown has been transformational on everyone's and business and work, but even more so for us as a category.
The luxury activewear which you operate in is niche, but yet broad in that sense. And I think obviously what COVID has done is expanded that. On your website, you talk about ethically made in Europe. So you're very proud of your French heritage. You're very proud that your products are made in Europe. And sustainability, how much of that plays a part in your mind as a leader?
No, definitely. I think that's a really good question. And I would say it's at the forefront of our thought process. We would love to be fully sustainable, and any decision we make is with that goal in mind. We are extremely proud to be, 100% made in Europe for many reasons. Sustainability, ethics, transport, a lot of that goes into it, but it's also into the very big craftsmanship heritage that, Europe has. And also it's one of the reasons why our products are sometimes more expensive than some other brands. If you're a brand who sells, a bra for £30, the only way you can do that is because you're producing, in sweatshops in Asia, really. And I understand not everyone, is able to afford that type of level, but I'm kind of just trying to justify why brands are price positioned in different ways.
Yeah.
To answer specifically your question on sustainability, that's a value that for me as an individual is extremely important. But I also think consumers are really awakening to this, and I think it's going to be one of the core values that people look at in the next 10 years. And people are are taking that into consideration when they shop. So concretely, in terms of, our thought process where, I guess where we think about it the most is when we choose our fabrics in our factories.
Yeah.
So as much as possible, we use recycled fabrics, if not organic fabrics, natural fabrics, and then, all of our factories are audited for sustainability and ethics also.
I love the fact that you didn't say this, but in the sense, if you want to create beautiful products that are sustainable, then potentially, and do last longer, then there is a price position on that. There is a price aspect of it. But you mentioned a few things that I'd just like to sort of get your perspective on. Number one, with Brexit around the corner, you're an online digital business, so do you see that having a big impact? I mean, it might sound like a dumb question, but do you see it having a big impact on you?
Yeah, definitely. One of the reasons being, so obviously, 35% of our sales are in the UK. We're actually we have an office in London. We have, some team members in Paris. We have a very big following in the US also.
Right.
And the rest in Europe, mainly France. Now today, a big thing, there's two things, when you think about geography, other than obviously, the customer base is shipping costs and also duty.
Yeah.
As you said, Brexit is coming very soon. So I guess the first thing we did is take another warehouse already in Europe, and we moved some of our stock there. So I think it's definitely an action that people need to make, especially in the current circumstances where there's no Brexit deal as of yet, and we need to be prepared for a no Brexit deal.
Yeah, no, absolutely. In terms of your digital channels that you spoke about, obviously, you can find your stuff in physical stores in the UK today.
Yeah, you can. Not our own stores, but in places like Selfridges, Fenwick, so high-end department stores.
And so, with that in mind, what's your view on physical retail? Because you talked about having the flexibility of having the sort of power to move around digitally and connect with your customers through Instagram. What does that make you? What's your view towards physical for you guys specifically, rather than the physical retail in general?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm very in favor of physical retail. One of the reasons being, I think our products are differentiated because of the quality, especially because of the fabrics. And I think unless you've actually touched the fabrics, it's very difficult to understand. And you definitely can't see it from a photo, online.
Sure.
And obviously, so I think it's important for people to see that product in person. I think the second point is, so that's, I guess, the sales part. The second part is more linked to events. Now, obviously, we are in lockdown, or at least, I don't know how you say it, but distanciation at the moment.
Yeah.
So we're not doing these events anymore. But before, we used to organize a lot of yoga classes, pop-up stores, things like that. So I guess to answer your question, I'm not someone who thinks that a brand should necessarily be 100% digital.
Yeah.
I think it's important also to build a physical community.
Yeah.
I think the human, interaction is extremely important. I would personally love to have a couple of Leoty physical stores, own brand stores.
Yeah.
Obviously it's not something we've done yet, but it's, something we're thinking about for
fantastic.
Whenever budget permits.
Yeah, understood. With Christmas around the corner, what's your view on what type of Christmas you guys will have?
That's a really good question. And you know what? We haven't actually spent that much time thinking about it. It's a kind of a subject we keep keep pushing away because, you know, things are changing so much. You know, obviously we've had a couple of Christmases behind us as a brand.
Yep.
And Christmas typically isn't the strongest period for us at all.
Oh, interesting.
I would say January is much stronger because January is a moment when people are trying to get back into shape. And actually the entire period January to June is a very good one for us as people want to get their beach body back.
Yeah.
So Christmas, you know, in the past we've done a lot of gifting, events, promotions, trying to sell the product as a gift, but it's not necessarily the best period for us. What we have done though is trying to create content around Christmas. So done things like what we call 12 Days of Leoty, which is, you know, kind of an advent calendar for our customers where we provide them with gifts in partnerships with other brands. But yeah, to answer your question, even from a personal perspective, no one really knows how Christmas is going to be this year.
Yeah.
So we haven't really done as much as we should have.
I got you. I understand. When you sort of looking out further ahead in terms of into the next 2 years, 3 years, where do you see your brand? There is a strong association with yoga and the sort of health aspect of the brand. Do you see yourself expanding out beyond? I noticed actually you had knitwear on Instagram when I was looking. So was that a new thing? Have you done knitwear before? Have I just missed it?
No, it is a new thing. So it's a really good question. As a brand, when you're launching, obviously you're quite focused, and then you're able to go into new categories. And I think that's the beauty of Ernest Leoty and why I love it so much is that it's really, I don't see it at all as, you know, a very, very niche brand. I think it has massive potential. Actually, my ambition is for it to be a lifestyle brand. So really across many, many categories. And the way I would define it is bringing chic into comfort.
Right.
And so just to be more specific, there are a number of categories that we have started in the past. As you mentioned, knitwear, there's also loungewear, swim. So swim actually did incredibly well for us last summer. And it's something that we're definitely going to be pushing, you know, next summer. And I don't know if you noticed, but we also expanded into running. So we do have a running capsule.
Yeah.
But, you know, the sky is the limit. Like, I think there's so many things we could be doing. We're thinking about an accessories range, for example. I think product expansion specifically, we're looking at so many different categories and you know, there's a lot of new stuff coming in soon.
Yeah.
But obviously that's one dimension of it. I think for us as a brand, I think geographic expansion is also super important because, we already have sales in so many different countries.
Yeah.
And then finally, there's, you know, a digital dimension, I think. Expanding our online sales, but also imagining new ways of how we can communicate with the end consumer. So our IG Live, online classes have done really well.
Yeah.
And so I guess it's seeing how we can communicate with our end customer in a way which is not just selling products to them, but also in different formats. So obviously we did these classes on Instagram, you know, can we do them on YouTube? Can we do them on our own, you know, website? What else can we do other than these digital classes? So yeah, a lot to think about.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you mentioned the word ambition and there's absolutely, I can see that there is no shortage of that. Just to shift gears in terms of this is the Female Leaders sort of series. And one of the questions I've asked, which has had a mixed sort of response, what was it like being a female founder in the first phases of your business, and even now, actually, because if you are going to grow, I assume that some of this may be funded growth as opposed to organic growth. How much does it or does not play a part in your journey?
No, that's a really interesting question. And you know what? So as you said, I used to work in finance, and we still have these bi-monthly dinners with my former friends, colleagues, and we talk about that all the time, which is what it's like to be a woman, in today's professional world. So I guess, first of all, I'm very used to being, one of the few women, both in engineering school and then working in finance.
Yeah.
And I'm a big believer of the fact that at the end of the day, people listen to competence. So that's one point.
Yeah.
I guess the second point, though, I definitely think fundraising for the first time as a woman is incredibly difficult. I think we have to be honest.
Yeah.
I know that, where we are today, as in a bit more established, there's definitely more demand for it. And, there's some initiatives about female founded, investments, things like that. But I don't know. I think people feel more comfortable, in terms of having a male leader, at least investors.
Yeah.
And even from my side, so, the fashion industry is very female dominated, which was completely new to me.
Yeah.
But if you think about diversity, we have very few men in our company. Actually, we don't have any at the moment. We've had some in the past. And recruiting, I'd love to have a man in my company.
Okay, there's a space for me. Anyone running your technology at the moment?
But, I think there are some cliches, even in my own mind, about what it's like to be a man or a woman. And yeah, so to answer your question, I think it's not that easy to be a female founder.
I got you. And to be fair, that's I've had that. That's the sort of feedback I've had in the sense that that there are the challenges for specifically for raising funds, and obviously if we can do anything to challenge those stereotypes and keep promoting successful young companies such as yours, I think then people's perceptions will change. Yeah, and that's it. Okay. In terms of shifting gears again, and then looking at the broader sense, you set off, and it was very evident from day one that you are a luxury brand. You use quality products, you go to quality meals, and you want to provide luxury activewear. So going forward, how big is luxury going to be for you?
I think the question is, how do you define luxury?
Okay.
To answer your question, the reason I positioned the brand the way I did wasn't necessarily a strategy. It was also a question of, what I thought would be interesting, what I would buy as a customer. So it was quite personal.
Yeah.
And then I remember I had some price targets for our product and then for our fabric. And I remember I had given specific target for our first legging.
Yeah.
And then when I saw the quality that came back, I was like, okay, that's never going to work. Like, let's double the price target, just because the feel of, the first fabric was, not at all, what I would have worn as a customer. So I think one of the drivers is definitely what that positioning allows me to do.
Yeah.
At the same time, I think you have to question what is luxury, because it's not necessarily linked to price. And in that sense, we have decreased some of our prices, mainly because we've cut off the wholesale margin, which allows us to give, more value to the end customer.
Yeah.
And if I take examples of brands, like, the US brand Glossier, which is a beauty brand, on the one end. So creating affordable, even Uniqlo in some senses, I think is very aspirational and creates beautiful basics. And then on the other end, if you think, the French cafe, where you get your coffee for €1.20, but, it tastes amazing. I think luxury isn't necessarily linked to the traditional price value proposition that people can see. And then I think my last point would be, I think traditional luxury brands haven't necessarily been good at communicating in the digital world, whether it's Instagram or their website. And actually before you, I was just speaking to a content creator, of what we wanted. And she was like, okay, how many pictures do you want from the shoot? And she was like, is 10 okay? And I was like, no, actually we need like 100. And they don't need to all be perfect because they're only going to be seen once by our followers. So just a very different way of communicating to the end customer.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because you have mentioned digital and data in the previous answers. I was curious in terms of moving closer. Obviously, Instagram has been a really big part of building your community. How do you see yourselves moving closer to the customer in the digital way?
Yeah, no, definitely. So actually, that's an initiative we're working on at the moment, which is, as a brand, you need to focus on getting new customers, but also you need to focus on engaging your existing customers more. So that's a focus at the moment. And that's, I guess, a number of channels. Instagram is one of them. One which is completely untapped on our side is, even more traditional CRM.
Yeah.
So reaching out to, and actually a lot of brands are focusing on that today. So sending emails, or even reaching out by SMS to your existing customer base. Obviously we're not planning, it might not be obvious, but we're not planning on doing any physical events at the moment, even though it's something we get asked quite a bit.
Yeah.
And to be more specific, how are we re-engaging with them? So for example, on Instagram, we're doing more surveys, and then what we're doing, there's Instagram Live, and then sending them much more tailored emails. So we used to send them newsletters, but now we're going to try to tailor them to, who the actual customer is. So, depending on where they are, who they are, what they've bought, how many times they've bought. So it's a question of segmentation, really.
Understood. So in conclusion, Marion, in terms of where people can get more information about all the beautiful products that you have, where can they find that more?
No, that's, thanks for asking. So if you guys want to find out more about us, I think the best place is really our website. So, ErnestLeoty.com.
Okay. I'll include the link to the website on the show notes. So I'll do that.
Great. And then our Instagram, I think, is also a really great place to find out more about the brand.
So with that, Marion, thank you so much for giving me some time and sharing this Friday afternoon with me. I look forward to hopefully seeing you soon sometime in the real world.
Thanks a lot.
The Retail Podcast, a global conversation hosted by Alex Rezvan Viennet.